When you play the Game of Thrones, you
Subscribe and like.
or you die. There is no middle ground.
Alright, hello YouTube, welcome back to the Scott YouTube channel. Today's video, we're going to be continuing our Song of Ice and Fire reread, and in today, we're going to be doing Ned VI. So this chapter is very impactful for a lot of characters that aren't even in this chapter. This chapter really goes about establishing Stannis' character. This is going to be huge for the next book. And this is a chapter that I think is a massive difference from, say, the show to the book, because this chapter does focus a lot on Stannis and what he is up to while he is not in King's Landing. And we're going to get Ned kind of figuring out what Jon Arryn was doing, what him and Stannis, they have this friendship together that seems very odd. And what were they doing? What was Jon Arryn trying to uncover? What did he uncover before his untimely death? So this will start us on page 272. I couldn't find a great image of Janice and Ned, like right when they were having this meeting in the show. But to set the scene, Janice is going to be giving kind of the state of King's Landing and the kind of rising crime because of the hands turning. So let's start on page 272. So to begin, Janice Slint is informing the small council that is the hands tourney, to which Ned again says he wants no part of. And he is referring to the hands tourney as causing all of this crime and this influx of people into the city. Either way, Janice continues saying that the tourney is drawing more people to the city and crime is growing rampant with thievery and rape and other crimes going up. Now, I really like that there's different reactions to this news. Some people like Varys kind of shrug this off and say, oh, how dreadful, because Varys, again, has spies everywhere. He knows what the state of the city is already. It doesn't really surprise him. But we see how different characters take this. Renly basically straight up says, Janice, if you can't hold the king's peace, maybe we should find someone else that can. And here's a good point that I thought about when I was reading this chapter, and specifically when Renly brings this up. If we think about someone like Daemon, where he really kind of creates the golden cloaks in the Dance of the Dragons and what we've seen in House of the Dragon and all that, crime is extremely low during Daemon's rule, or being the Lord of the Gold Cloaks. He takes a very strict approach to this. And some people have said maybe he liked the violence or he liked punishing people, kind of doing that idea that he was like Maegor in a way. But we look at Daemon as someone that was pretty good at his job, actually. And we see Janice, who is someone that is the complete opposite. He is not able to keep the peace. He is not someone that demands respect, it would seem like, from the city, as they don't really care about committing these crimes. And that's what I think is very important, as well, as when we look at all this corruption, we know Janice is under Littlefinger's thumb. It's interesting to think about how Janice is not able to keep control of the city. And again, we see a little bit of Renly's wisdom, where Renly can be this character that is very flamboyant. He makes jokes of everything, but he at other times can be very serious and actually have some wisdom. That Janice is incompetent. We should get a different commander. And that will lead us into page 273. Now, Janice, I think it makes sense. He's not very happy about this as well. And he basically says, I need more men. I don't have the men to keep the peace. Which may be true, but at the same time, I kind of doubt it. I think Janice just does not lead well. I think this is something that's very apparent when we get to Jon's chapters and when Janice is at the wall. Janice is not someone that people respect whatsoever. And Ned's going to take one approach to this that I can understandably see why he does take this approach. He doesn't know Janice well, but he's going to take an approach that I'm not overly fond of. But also, I wanted to note here that Ned describes Janice as being this bald frog. A very weird description. And also, Janice notes here, again, this is going to show, I think, Janice's ignorance, but that Aegon the Dragon could not keep the peace, which makes no sense to me. Aegon specifically has really no rebellion during his reign, because people understand that Aegon just conquered all the Seven Kingdoms. If you're going to start a rebellion or a resistance, you're going to do something against the Targaryens, you're going to wait till Aegon passes, and that's exactly what we see. All of that goes into Aenys' reign. That's where we see a lot of that rebellion and seeing how far you can push this new Targaryen reign before they fight back. And I thought that was interesting to note that Janus is not someone that's particularly smart. I don't know what he's trying to say here. Maybe he's trying to say that Aegon himself invaded Dorne and that didn't go well either. Completely different thing here. Aegon himself was starting the war. Whereas in this situation, we're seeing some other idea that he just can't keep people in line because he has no respect from anyone, really. So I thought that was a very interesting line there, and it kind of shows me a lot about Janus, and it should show Ned a lot about him as well. But another thing I wanted to bring up, because this is just after we got done with the Jon chapter, and Jon notes that Sam is this character that, yes, he says he's a coward, but there's a certain amount of courage in saying you are a coward. Janus is the opposite. We're seeing the kind of the flip of the coin, where Janus puffs himself up when he's talking. He is someone that tries to act the hero, like he's very courageous. Janus at heart is a coward. So it's kind of that exact parallel that we see with the last chapter. Some of George's best writing is built like that, where each of these chapters have a theme that carries over to the next one. And again, like I talked about, Janus, he basically requests more men. And at this point, Ned is at a decision. Does he give Janus more men? Or does he maybe find someone else to run the watch? Which, again, would make a lot of sense. What could Ned do here in this situation that's much better? What he could do is instead remove Janus and put someone from his own guard as the leader of the City Watch. You could also then put men into the City Watch, and you could try to establish their loyalty, because now the City Watch is being directly led by Ned's men. So again, that is something I think Ned should have taken into consideration. He doesn't do that. And it's something that I think with Ned realizing how corrupt the courts are right now and how he's being spied on all the time, this is a move that could have been a massive power play that Ned doesn't do. He basically tells Littlefinger to hire more men. Again, putting more of that influence that Littlefinger is going to be in control of the City Watch. It's more of that little subtle foreshadowing. Ned notes that he found the coin for the tourney. He can find it for the King's Peace as well. Ned then also does something that I very much dislike as well. He allows 20 of his own guard to be used basically by Janus. They're eventually going to be under Alan's command for their guard, basically, but Janus is still above them, more or less. And this is a bad move to me from Ned, because one, he allows his guard to go under somebody else's rule who doesn't seem like they're completely competent. I understand why Ned's doing it, but there's a better way of doing that. Ned could have done the exact same thing, but instead of having Janus as the person in charge, he could have his own man in charge, taking out that idea. And also, we know that Ned feels stronger about the Northern men and their beliefs. I think that would have been a better move than just letting Janus stay in that same position. And while this is going on, Ned does think and notes that Robert again is not here, and that they are left to do these small matters. Janus then leaves, and Ned thinks how happy he will be when all of this is over, and is wounded by everyone calling it his tourney. Again, Ned wants nothing to do with this, and all of this tourney has done is cause him more issues. But Robert says that he should be honored by this. And again, it just shows the disconnect between Ned and Robert. Because if Robert really thinks Ned would enjoy this, he doesn't really know Ned at all. So it's either Robert doesn't really understand Ned, or Robert is someone that's doing this for his own reasons, but he's using it as a pretext. That's saying, oh yeah, we need a tourney because Ned's here, but really I want the tourney. That is more like what it possibly could be, or even just a mixture of both. Pycelle then at this moment chimes in that saying these events are good for the people. It brings the powerful to try and find glory, and also the poor a respite from their woes. And Littlefinger also brings up that it brings gold in many pockets, especially with whores and brothels. Again, I want to point out something here. Pycelle is right here. Like, if you have a very dull kingdom where there's very little enjoyment, people will make their own enjoyment. That is something that we're told, and that's very true, right? So I think Pycelle is right in this. But the issue here is, okay, one, is the crown making their money back from what they spend on these events? And if they're not, well, then we have a problem. And that's something that characters like Jon Arryn, like Robert Baratheon, like Ned should be looking into. how is it that we're not making back this gold? You would think from the tax from people coming into the city on brothels, food, things like that, that they should, with all this influx of people, be making money back. But they're not. And that's something where we talk about where, yes, it is Robert Baratheon's mishandling of funds and constantly having extravagant events, but also Littlefinger is pocketing a lot of that gold as well. He's self-profiting off of these things. So again, that's something to think about. And it's just something else that Ned will have to try and unravel, which unfortunately he does not. And at this moment of the whores being brought up, we're given a little bit of tidbit here, which I think is very interesting. It shows us a lot about Stannis' character. Renly pops up and says that, Renly pops up and he recalls how Stannis once tried to outlaw brothels, and Robert had told him what he liked to outlaw drinking, eating, and breathing as well, which tells us a lot about Stannis, because Ned, so far, of anyone really at these courts, seems like the only person that's kind of against brothels. Everyone else seems like they're just completely normal. Ned is not a big fan of them, even when this talk is going on. Ned is someone that doesn't want to talk about whores. That's where this conversation will end. So Stannis has already shown to us that he's this character that is dutiful because he doesn't whore when he has a wife. It shows us a lot already about him wanting to ban it, which is a very smart move, right? Brothels are something that create a lot of diseases, and they're just not good in general. Now, they can be good, especially during a medieval time, for the reasons Littlefinger likes them. They can be very profitable, and they can help put gold in the coffers. But for really all of the moral reasons, I think it's not a great thing for a population. Now, Renly also then remarks, again, we get more onto this, that he wonders how Stannis even got Selyse, his wife, pregnant. Because Stannis goes to his bed like a man going to the battlefield to do his duty. Again, so we get this idea that Stannis doesn't take pleasure in things like sex or even in his relationship. So again, it shows a lot of Stannis being this dutiful character that doesn't have enjoyment in these things. And that's only going to be built on. This is something that I think is great for the books, because by the time we get into Clash, we have some of these things in the back of our head on this preconceived image of what Stannis is. Something the show didn't do as well. And Ned, again, was not happy about this. He doesn't really like that Stannis is kind of being made fun of, that they're openly talking about whores and things like that. And Ned kind of quietly goes, I wonder as well when Stannis is going to reclaim his seat on the small council, because apparently he's fled to Dragonstone, but Ned words it is, after his visit to Dragonstone, when will he come back? Which, it's very peculiar. The timing of when Stannis leaves is very odd, because we know, and a lot of the people in this room know, that Stannis spent some time with Jon Arryn. Jon Arryn dies, and now when Robert goes north, Stannis leaves. So very interesting timing, and I think Ned completely understands what's going on there. So that gets into page 274. And Littlefinger's then going to jest that when the whores are gone is when Stannis will come back. And Ned, he's had enough of this. He doesn't want to talk about whores anymore, and he leaves the meeting and telling his guardsmen, Harwin, interesting little name for the House of the Dragon viewers, to have Jory come to his chambers and for his horse to be saddled. And again, I want to say I couldn't really find great images for this chapter. I just really couldn't. I looked on Google just for the things that happened in this chapter. There wasn't a lot of good ones, so we're just going to kind of reuse some images that more or less kind of explain what's going on. But we're going to have this next sequence now where it's Ned and Jory talking a bit, and they're changing and getting ready to go follow a lead that eventually we're going to talk about. So Ned thinks how much he hates this heat, and it's another thing we got earlier on in this chapter that I didn't really feel like was as big of a note, but we know that the city is extremely hot, and that's been kind of a plague onto the city right now of the extreme heat. And Ned right now would do anything to, have Catelyn's embraces and to be back in the north where it's colder and he doesn't have to worry about sweating so much, and to even hear Jon and Robb at swordplay. And while he's changing his clothes, he thinks about the book that Pycelle had given him in the last Ned chapter. Ned notes that Pycelle was correct. It was a pretty ponderous and boring read, but Ned is convinced there was something hidden in there, so he kept on reading it. Again, us as, second-time viewers or readers, we know what he's looking for, but in this moment, it is ponderous. What is he looking for? What could Ned possibly find in this lineage book? And Ned then flips back to House Lannister and notes, we get some great history drops here as we note that House Lannister came from Lan the Clever. He's basically the equivalent of Bran the Builder for the Starks, where it's like this big legend of their house. And Lan the Clever was the hero of their family. He had outwitted the Casterlys right out of Casterly Rock and had taken it. Also, we see another legend that the Lannisters get their hair straight from the sun itself. Jory then arrives, and Ned tells him that 20 men are to go help the Goldcloaks under the command of Alan. Now, I want to go back to the point that I just made here with the Lannisters getting their hair from the sun itself. This is a big point, because let's think about the reasons that Ned is going to come to the conclusion that Joffrey, Myrcella, and Tommen are all Lannisters. Are full Lannisters, there's no Baratheon in them. Because, one, we see that their hair is very gold. They have that very golden hair, and all of Cersei's children have that. And something we're going to see by the end of this chapter, when we look at when we look at Robert's bastard, is he's going to have none of those features, which he's going to have quite the opposite. The black hair, the blue eyes, the very defined chin, very muscular. All of things in which Joffrey is not. So that gets us into page 275. So moving into page 275, Ned then asks if Jory found the stable boy that Littlefinger had talked about. Again, we see in the last Ned chapter that Littlefinger had said there's 4 people that he could possibly try and interview. And this is the last one that they have gone to. And Ned was hoping he would be more of use. Because again, the other sources really didn't give Ned much information. Sir Hugh, who had just been knighted, he was too arrogant and proud. He wouldn't speak to Jory. He would only speak to Ned. And if Ned wanted to summon him, then he would talk. But outside of that, he would not. And again, it shows a lot of what knighthood means. And we get this idea that what is a knight? For Brienne, she is the quintessential knight. She tries to help everyone, the poor, the weak. And we see someone like Sir Hugh who is not that. It kind of feels like knighthood is an empty title now at this point. It isn't about chivalry anymore. And we see this in A Song of Ice and Fire. There was a point where it really was a chivalrous thing to be a knight. When we look at, say, for instance, Aemon the Dragon Knight, or even around that time period when we have characters like Daemon Blackfire or Baelor Breakspear, these are all characters that were very chivalrous. That was kind of a time period of chivalry. That has kind of disappeared and as the world has gone on. But Jory then tells Ned that the stable boy told him that Jon Arryn and Stannis had been spending more time together. They had been going out on rides, and that they had gone to a certain armorer to get a new breastplate made. Now, this is going to bring off a lot of red flags for Ned personally, because there's a couple of things that we're going to discuss as this conversation goes on that just didn't add up about that sentence. Why are Jon Arryn and Stannis spending a lot of time together? Ned notes this, thinking Jon and Stannis had always been cordial, but never friendly. And Stannis is not very friendly to many people. So, again, very odd. Also, Ned puts together that, again, as soon as Jon died, Stannis fled to Dragonstone. Reminded that for a second time now in this chapter. So again, a lot of emphasis is being put on here that Stannis knew something, and that is why he fled, or maybe he was involved in something. And Ned is going to come to this weird conclusion that maybe Stannis helped murder Jon. Ned finds it very doubtful, but there's only 2 options here: is that Stannis is fleeing from something because he's afraid, or that he helped kill Jon. And we also learn here that Stannis was given Dragonstone and the Targaryen lands after winning it for Robert. Again, we're not really exploring what Stannis and Robert felt about that idea, but we're just learning that that is what happened. Ned then asks if the stable boy knew where they went on their rides, and the stable boy says, a brothel. Again, another weird thing that makes no sense given the information that we know of Stannis and Jon Arryn. Ned is someone that gets a lot of his personality from Jon Arryn. Ned is someone that looked up to Jon as a father figure and took a lot of those things from Jon. And Jon Arryn and Stannis both do not really believe in brothels that much. So Ned is shocked to learn this. And he even thinks that Robert was known for his lust, but never Stannis. We get more descriptions into who Stannis is as a person. He is humorless, stern, and grim. Again, continuing on to our idea of what Stannis is already as a character. Again, Jory says that the stable boy insisted it was the truth and that he had always taken 3 guards, all of which were back in the Eyrie to Ned's displeasure. Again, we see a lot of inconvenience here for Ned because, and this is something that I think Ned and Catelyn really do not pick up on at all, is that if Lysa was trying to help them uncover this mystery of the murder and give proof, why is every lead that Ned could possibly have not in King's Landing? Why is it all in the Eyrie? Why didn't Lysa give him anything to work with and to help him? Again, should be some red flags. Jory then asks if Stannis will come back or if that Ned will call him back. And Ned says he doesn't want to yet. He wants to learn more and kind of whose side Stannis is on. Again, Ned is kind of painting this as black and white. Like there's 2 sides here. When in reality, there's many different angles going on. There's a lot of self-interest going on in this situation. And that's something we really see all throughout A Song of Ice and Fire. I've really been getting into the first Blackfire Rebellion and just the amount of different angles that were going on that culminated in some of the decisions that maybe Aegon IV made or maybe was pushed to make are very fascinating. The different factions that had their own self-interests. That's something we see exactly here with people like Littlefinger, like Varys, like Renly. All of these characters have their own motivations. So I think that's very interesting to think about. And again, Ned thinks that Stannis could have been involved in the murder, but he really doubts it. And he also thinks that maybe Stannis was afraid of something. But what could make Stannis afraid? And that's what Ned notes, because Ned understands that Stannis is this great military commander and someone that isn't scared, right? He survived the siege of Storm's End for a year, and it got so bad that they had to eat rats and boot leather while Lord Tyrell was outside the walls sieging the castle. So what is going to make Stannis so afraid that he has to leave the city? That should be another major red flag for Ned and something that he will pick up on. Ned then tells Jory to bring him the doublet with the Stark sigil on it. He wants the armor to know who he is, and that might make him more forthcoming to answer Ned's questions. So again, Ned is basically wanting to play the rich lord now. He doesn't want to be not spotted or any of that. He's definitely playing into his status, which is going to work wonders in this chapter, as we'll see. But something I think is very interesting is that Ned takes the precautions of trying to see if anyone's following them or basically spying on them as they're going to the armor later on in the chapter. So I kind of think, like, what was Ned really thinking? Like, did he think he wasn't going to get spotted going to this armor? I just think there's a lot of things that with Ned that doesn't really make any sense when he's trying to stop people from spying on him, but I don't know. We also see that Renly was not invited on these trips, and why is that? And that's going to go into another really interesting plot in page 277 that Ned notes Renly has kind of been acting weird. He's been asking him weird questions, and he wasn't involved in these trips with Stannis and Jon. Why is that? Is it because Renly can never take things seriously? Is that because Renly had his own things going on? Why is that what happens? And we get a really interesting point where Ned recalls a couple of weeks ago that Renly had shown Ned a locket of a girl who Renly asked if she reminded him of anyone, to which Ned says no. Renly said that this was Loras Tyrell's sister, and that some had said she looked like Lyanna, to which Ned is just basically like, no, she doesn't look like my sister. What a weird question. Could you imagine just out of nowhere, let's say you have a sister or you have a brother, and out of nowhere, somebody just basically goes, hey, do you think this looks like your brother or sister, especially if they're like past and they've been dead for a while. It's such a weird question. And Ned thinks that this is very weird, but it's a major red flag that Ned misses. Why would Renly care if someone looked like Lyanna? And even if he came to the right conclusion that, oh, Renly is trying to get Marjorie to then maybe marry Robert instead, would then Ned make the connection that Renly is trying to depose of Cersei because of probably the bastardy kids? Ned doesn't make that connection. And Ned doesn't really think about this too much. He just thinks it's weird. And maybe that Renly just has another weird obsession like Robert of a younger Lyanna. Now, this could make sense because Renly is this character that looks exactly like a younger Robert. He even kind of tries to act like Robert at certain points. So again, I think a lot of that makes sense from Ned's rationale, but at the same time, he should think there's more going on than just that. Ned and Jory then talk about the possible return of Stannis for the tourney, to which Ned finds very unlikely. Again, Ned understands that Stannis is not someone that cares about tourneys, and that if this is such a serious situation, he's not going to come back for that. We learn that this armorer lives in his shop on the Street of Steel, and especially on the top of the hill. We also learn something else similar to Ned, is that Jon never cared for ornaments. Again, we see another comparison of where Ned is someone that takes after Jon quite a bit, but Jon never cared for ornaments or fancy stuff on his armor, so this brings up another red flag of why was he going to buy a new breastplate with like a falcon on it and all these elaborate things on it? Why would that happen? Ned then tells Jory to start looking for the right whorehouse, which he is very pleased with. He can go explore all of the whorehouses because, again, he wants to figure out where Jon and Stannis are going. Ned then, with 2 guards, heads out to the King's Gate with all the eyes following them. So again, Ned is definitely someone that's much more paranoid now about the situation and the climate of King's Landing after being showed that there are spies everywhere. He's someone that's going to be looking over his shoulder now, but the thing here is, if you're Ned, you should be expecting to be followed. You've made yourself an easy target. You're wearing very nice clothing, very flamboyant clothing that show that you are a Stark. And there's not exactly a lot of Starks in the capital right now. And again, something we see on paranoia from Ned about this is that he sent men ahead to watch for anyone following Ned on the road. And also we learned that the Street of Steel is by the marketplace by the Mudgate. But again, I talked about this earlier with the sending men forward to see if they were being watched or followed. And it's like, Ned, you're obviously going to be watched or followed. I just think it's a very odd thing. Maybe he's trying to figure out who these spies are, but there are countless spies in the city. Rumor is going to spread about the Hand of the King going up to maybe get some new armor or something. I just think it's very weird. Now, Ned sees many things on his journey up. He sees a man selling apples and others selling other goods, and kids play fighting, which reminds him of Bran. But when they get close to the gates, we see some knights roll in on their horses, and we are introduced to Beric Dondarrion and his entourage. And the guardsmen ask if he is here for the tourney, to which he says he is here to win it. Again, showing that young Beric how he's very confident, and Ned describes him as being very dashing and a young man who's dressed very finely. And again, this makes a lot of sense because we have to remember that Jane Poole is a character that is going to have a massive crush on Beric later on, and he's just a massively different character in the show than in the books, in my opinion, where I don't think they really did that justice. But at this point, Ned then turns off onto the Street of Steel and sees many people haggling over prices and such, trying to get better prices for maybe chainmail or other types of armor. And that gets us into page 279. Ned is then continuing to climb the street and notes that the further they go, the bigger the shops are, and the houses are even bigger as well. And again, it's showing that as we go up, we're kind of getting to more of the rich area of the point of the shop and the street, where the bottom is kind of like maybe more of your common dealers. We're now getting up to the rich, and we're gonna really see that as we go on. He enters, and there is a young serving woman who instantly recognizes the sigil and gets his master, who beckons him to sit on the couch and calls for wine. We find his name is Tabho Mott. Tabho begins to go on and on about his work. Again, he's being this guy that's basically talking about all of his art and all of his works. Ned isn't saying anything. Ned's basically just sitting on the couch, just enjoying the talk, and he very much goes into the quiet wolf persona that we will see in this page and the next. And he takes this approach where he's just letting Tabho go on. Tabho says that he is the one who made Renly's great green armor and the antlers on his helm, that no one else in Westeros or King's Landing is as good as him. He has learned how to reforge Valyrian steel. He then suggests maybe a wolf helm to scare people, and Ned finally pipes up saying, "Did you make a falcon helm for Jon Arryn?" So again, Ned plays into this really well. He lets him talk, and what I think is interesting here is that Ned is kind of letting the conversation go. He's letting Tabho basically tell him what he wants to know. But Tabho pauses for a long moment and confirmed that yes, Lord Arryn and Stannis had called on him many times, not just once, many times, but it was never for his work. And again, this should send some signals to Ned. Why were they coming here? And Ned leans into this quiet persona as he kind of thinks that a lot of times he's found that instead of asking questions, sitting there silently sometimes will reveal more answers than not. And as Tabho continues saying, they always came to see the boy, which Ned also wants to see. And Tabho was not pleased by this, because Tabho was kind of this man that's thinking, okay, I'm about to get a huge score here. I have the hand of the king, this great lord. He will definitely be wanting some armor or something for the tournament or something like that. I'm going to get a huge payday. And no. Ned is here doing the same thing Jon Arryn and Stannis did. And we note, and Ned notes this specifically, that all the friendliness left Tabho during this moment. But all the same, he took him to the forge in the back, which was like being inside a dragon's mouth. And a tall boy about the age of Robb was called over. Right away, we notice that Gendry is much different than, say, someone like Joffrey. Gendry is strong and muscular with blue eyes and dark black hair that was unkempt with sweat. Tabho tells Gendry to show them his work. He leads them back to a bull helm, which even Ned notes expertly crafted, and even asks to buy it. Again, that is high praise. If you're someone like Gendry who's still very young, you make a helmet that's so good, even someone like Ned who's been around helmets, warfare his entire life, notes that this is quality work. Gendry instantly states that it is not for sale, that it is for him, and he takes it away to Tabho's horror, which Tabho is just sitting here like, okay, one, I was hoping I was going to get a payday, but even then, right, when Ned does offer to buy something, Gendry takes it away. For a salesman, this is going quite horribly for him. But Tabho tells Gendry to give it to Ned as a gift. It is a great honor to be asked of his, to which Gendry says no, he made it for himself. And that gets us into page 281. And I think this being made for Gendry himself does show why it's so expertly crafted, that Gendry put a lot more love into this. And Tabho tries to apologize for Gendry, saying he could use a few beatings, but Ned says there's nothing to be forgiven and asks Gendry what Jon Arryn came for. And Gendry says he asked me questions. Ned obviously wants to know more than that. I mean, Gendry's just like, he asked me questions. Ned wants to know what questions. And Gendry says how I am doing, how I'm being treated, if I liked it here, who my mother was, and what she looked like. And Ned says, well, what did you tell them? Gendry says that his mother died, and she had golden hair and sang to him when he was much younger. Now, this is very interesting, because if Gendry's mother had golden hair, why isn't any of that present in Gendry? When we see that Robert Baratheon is someone that has a wife that has golden hair, but all of her children come out with golden hair. This is the little key point here that is interesting. Ned then asks if Stannis ever asked anything, but Gendry says no, he never said anything, but he just glared at him. Again, it's this idea of Stannis being reminded of the bastards of Robert, and that can be even traced back to Edric Storm and that event that really traumatized Stannis on his wedding night as well. And again, we get a bit of backstory for Gendry, as Tabo says that Gendry has always been a stubborn boy and became known as bull-headed when some kids had been calling him that, and he threw his helmet in their teeth for the people that called him that. Ned then wants to kind of look at Gendry's face more and really confirm what he believes, and he tells him to look at him. Ned now knows what Jon was looking for. Gendry has the Baratheon features of the strong jaw, the black hair, and the blue eyes. He then leaves Gendry to his work and leaves. He asks Tobho who paid his fee, and Tobho at first lies, saying he took him on for free, which, it's King's Landing. Nobody does anything for free. Because he was so strong, because Gendry had big hands, he was a strong boy, and Ned knows that's a lie. There's plenty of strong children on the streets, and he doesn't take them in. The armorer says, some lord, he does not know who, because his face was cloaked. This is going to get us into a very interesting idea. Who paid for Gendry's apprenticeship? I have my theory, and let's get into this next part of proof before I give you guys my theory on that, but Tobho mentions that he was round of shoulder and had a brown beard with a tint of red, but he paid the gold. So my conclusion here is that we know that Varys has a lot of different disguises, that he was a mummer, and that Viserys probably had a disguise on him. And this description kind of fits him of being more round of shoulder, kind of being bigger. And I think it makes a lot of sense for someone like Varys to keep this proof that Robert's children weren't actually his children. This is living proof of it. And what better way of doing that would be putting him in a forge where Gendry will grow strong and will continue to look more and more like Robert while someone like Joffrey doesn't. I think that is the logical conclusion for me on Varys paying for it, but I'd love to hear your guys' theories if you do not agree. Ned then notes, but you know who he is, to which the armorer indicates that yes, he does, but whatever he was before he came in, it does not matter. So very similar to, say, the Night's Watch, where it doesn't matter what someone's done before they came to the Watch. When you're with the Watch and you're on the wall, you are a brother now. And Ned kind of respects Tobho. He thinks that that is a pretty nice way of putting it, to give Gendry a life and not reveal his parentage. And Ned kind of finishes saying, if Gendry ever wants to swing a sword instead of forge one, to contact him, as he has the warrior look. He then exits, and his guards ask him if he found anything, to which he says he did, and he also wonders what Jon had wanted with Robert's bastard and why it had costed him his life. Again, Ned has not put all the dots together. He's understanding now why Jon was going to this forge, and he's found a bastard of Robert. And it's going to help him with looking at the lineage book. He's going to see another one of Robert's bastards. A lot of that is going to build and show us what Jon Arryn died for. Now, thank you guys all for watching the video. That is where we're going to end it. We're going to be getting into a Catelyn chapter in next week's video, and I hope you guys all enjoyed. And I'll see you guys all in the next one. Bye, guys.